No, the fact is that there is no information about the death toll of the war in Russian state media, and state media are the main media. They're dominating inside the country.
Yeah.
All the independent sources are being blocked and silenced in many, many different ways. And Russian officials, they do not report about the casualties to the public at all. And they only talk about Ukrainian losses, and they exaggerating this information.
Now, earlier today, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov announced that Russia hadn't yet achieved all its goals in the war with Ukraine. According to estimates released last month by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Russia has suffered more than 1.2 million total casualties since the invasion. Russia is also facing economic struggles, with growth of 1% last year. Let's get the thoughts of Farida Rustamova, the author of the Faridaily Substack, which covers Russian politics and society. Hello to you, Farida.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Can you give me your take on how strong or how weak is support for the war in Russia, among Russians, the war that Russia calls the special military operation?
Yeah, so that's a great question, actually. I've been asked this question for this entire period since the beginning of the war. And if we're talking about the support among the Russian population, I think we should be very careful when we're looking at the polling data, for example, and interpreting it, because it's really important to keep in mind that Russia is a dictatorship, and you can go to jail for speaking out against the war. We have recent data from January 2026 from a relatively independent pollster called Levada Center. And if we look at this data, when asked directly if you support the war or not, 76% of Russians say that they do support the actions of the Russian army. And 18% dare say that they do not support the actions of the Russian army. But remember, again, you can go to jail, literally, for speaking out against the war in Russia.
Yes.
But there's another question, and this is the way how the researchers are trying to grasp the real information from in current circumstances in Russia, and they ask another question. So when asked about should the war continue or should there be peace talks, most Russians support peace talks, and it's a long-term trend since 2022. And I think this is a more telling indicator than a direct question, direct answer.
Yes. Tell me, Farida, I think we still have the lines here, but over 1 million Russians have been killed and wounded. How far do you believe is that reality really appreciated by Russians?
No, the fact is that there is no information about the death toll of the war in Russian state media, and state media are the main media. They're dominating inside the country.
Yeah.
All the independent sources are being blocked and silenced in many, many different ways. And Russian officials, they do not report about the casualties to the public at all. And they only talk about Ukrainian losses, and they exaggerating this information. Only independent media gather the data about the dead and wounded, and they do this all by hand. And they're doing this while the Russian state does all it can to hide this information. So no, I mean, it's not something that Russian people can discuss because there's literally no information about it.
Yes. And as for Russia itself, Russia is now a war economy, isn't it? Industry is really significantly dedicated to the manufacture of munitions. Soldiers who have joined the military, brought into the military, they're offered higher pay than they can get in civilian life. I mean, you could say that Putin needs this war, and so does much of Russia.
Well, that's a great question. Of course, yeah, it's there's been a military-driven economic growth for sure for last 4 years in Russia, but there's a consensus among experts that Russian economy is stagnating. And if we talk about oil and gas revenues, which are very important for Russian economy, they fell to a record low in 2025, and this is a very recent data. And these falling oil and gas revenues combined with economic stagnation means that the Russian government option to dramatically increase the state spending is off the table. And this has an impact on Russian population. And according to, and if we gather this information, we can see that Russia can maintain its current high level of military spending for several more years. However, this would mean there is not enough money for infrastructure development and human capital. And, this is a question of the choice. And we all trying to, learn what's inside Putin's head and what choice he's going to make, in the future. But it's really hard to say.
Oh, well, it's good to get your thoughts on the show today. Farida Rustamova, thank you.